Was an exquisite Fragonard oil painting, no alarm protecting it. In the hall beyond, 2 Keith Harings and a Chagall. Here, in a conference room, were reams of papers containing the magic words required by the law to begin a corporate breach of contract suit for $300 million. And in a similar room down the hall sat roughly the same amount of paper, assembled in solemn blue binders, which would create a charitable trust to fund private AIDS research. Here, in a locked safe file room, rested the last will and testament of the world's 3rd richest man, whose name most people had never heard of. Mitchell Reece put these philosophical meanderings down to sleep deprivation, told himself to mentally shut up, and turned down the corridor that would lead to his office. Footsteps approaching. In a soldier's instant, the drapery man was on his feet, the ice pick in one hand, his burglar tools in the other. He eased behind the door to Reece's office and quieted his breathing as best he could. He'd been in this line of work for some years. He'd been hurt in fights and had inflicted a great deal of pain. He'd killed 7 men and 2 women. But this history didn't dull his emotions. His heart now beat hard, his palms sweated, and he fervently hoped he didn't have to hurt anyone tonight. Even people like him vastly preferred to avoid killing, which didn't mean he'd hesitate to if he were found out here. The steps grew closer. Mitchell Reece, walking unsteadily from exhaustion, moved down the corridor, his feet tapping on the marble floor, the sound occasionally muffled when he strode over the Turkish rugs carefully positioned throughout the firm, and carefully mounted on anti-skid pads. Law firms are extremely cognizant of slip-and-fall lawsuits. In his mind was a daunting list of tasks to complete before the trial that was scheduled in 2 days. Reece had graduated from Harvard Law 4th in his class, largely thanks to lists, memorizing for his exams volumes of cases and rules of law and statutes. He was now the firm's most successful senior litigation associate for much the same reason. Every single aspect of the case, the civil trial of New Amsterdam Bank and Trust Ltd. v. Hanover and Stiver Inc., was contained in a complicated series of lists, which Reece was constantly reviewing and editing in his mind. He supposed he'd been reviewing his lists when he'd neglected to pick up his scarf. He now approached the doorway and stepped inside. Ah, yes, there it was, the tan cashmere given to him by a former girlfriend. It sat just where he'd left it, next to the refrigerator in the coffee room across from his office. When he'd arrived that morning, well, make that yesterday morning at this point, he'd stopped first in this canteen room to make a pot of coffee, and had dropped the scarf on the table while getting the machine going. He now wrapped it around his neck and stepped out into the corridor. He continued to the front door of the firm. He hit the electric lock button, and, hearing the satisfying click that he'd come to know so well, thanks to his thousands of late hours at the firm, Mitchell Reece stepped into the lobby, where he summoned the elevator. As he waited, it seemed to him that he heard a noise somewhere in the firm, nearby, a faint whine of a door hinge, maybe, followed by the snick-snick of 2 metal objects faintly colliding. But then the elevator arrived. Reece stepped in and began once again reciting his scrolls of lists, silently to himself. "I think we may have a misunderstanding," Taylor Lockwood said. "Not really," returned the voice, also female though much older, from the phone. Taylor dropped into her squeaky chair and rolled against the wall of her cubicle. "Not really? What did that mean?" She continued. "I'm the lead paralegal on the SCB closing. That's at 4 today." It was 8:30 a.m., the Tuesday after the Thanksgiving holiday, and she'd just arrived back here after a few hours' sleep at home, having spent most of the night at the firm, editing, assembling, and stapling hundreds of documents for the closing this afternoon. Ms. Strickland, on the other end of the line, said, "You've been reassigned. Something urgent." This had never happened that Taylor knew about. It was general knowledge, as solid as Newton's laws, that a law firm partner was incapable of handling a business closing without the presence of the paralegal who'd worked on the deal. Law is manifest in the details, and a firm's paralegals are the gurus of minutiae. The only reason for a last-minute reassignment was if a major screw-up had occurred. But Taylor Lockwood did not screw up, and a cursory review of her ball-busting work on the case over the past weeks revealed no glitches, the remedy for which would involve her summarily getting kicked off the deal. What are my options?